Okay, and maybe if you would give a quick, and if you would maybe just give a quick kind of like the verse, and I'm sorry, but there are people who probably watching and missed the first part, so.
Well, first, we started off, the verse for that we're looking at today, or verses that we're looking at is Matthew 7:13 and 14.
Thank you.
And I'm going to read the verses both from the Hebrew Names Version as well as the New American Standard Bible. And the Hebrew Names Version reads, "Enter in by the narrow gate, for wide is the gate and broad is the way that leads to destruction, and many are those who enter in by it." And then to go to the 14th verse, "How narrow is the gate, and restricted is the way that leads to life. Few are those who find it." And then from the New American Standard Version, verse 13, "Enter through the narrow gate, for the gate is wide and the way is broad that leads to destruction, and there are many who enter through it." Then the 14th verse, "For the gate is small and the way is narrow that leads to life, and there are few who find it." We discussed some of the things that we basically got from the verse in the past, or that we were taught about the verse in the past. And we discussed how it was basically a very, very narrow path, some finite thing that you had to do, very restricted, not a lot of wavering, etc. And we also discussed, or it was brought up, where there was some questions of how this could be, because it was going to automatically be a lot of people, especially in a large church, who were not allowed to enter in that narrow path, just because the scripture says that many won't enter that narrow path.
So it's contrasting in two gates, one of which is wide, but that one, it's like the thing that easily draws you in, because it's just so easy, in a sense, to enter and to get through it, versus something that's narrow. And I mean, and even if there are a lot of people there may not be a lot of people at the narrow gate. People usually look for the easy way to do things physically. So it may not even be a lot of people waiting to try to get into the narrow gate.
Yes.
If you're looking for it, you can probably get through it when you choose to go through it at the narrow gate, because there's so few people. That's the way I look at it.
That is correct. I look at it the same way. I also mentioned that there's something that is in plain sight, and it was helped also though by a translation that wasn't the best, but it's something that is in plain sight that has been missed. I know at least I have missed it all this time, and I couldn't believe this being so blaring clear in what it's saying. But a lot of times, well, not a lot of times, just period, a lot of the things that we need to know, they're always right in front of us. It's just a matter of us closing our natural eyes so we can see those things that are before us. Those signs are there all the time. The first part of the verse, in verse 13, "Enter in by the narrow gate," actually translate more closely to gain access or to be granted access to arise to life by taking the fixed narrow entrance. The fixed narrow entrance is an entrance that is, according to once you break down the text, entrance that entrance or that narrow path is a stationary path. That was the root for the word narrow that was used in this particular case. Not only is that it is stationary, but it's strong, so it doesn't waver. as if it's been there for a while or almost set in stone.
The other thing about entering in is it relates to entering into a condition, sort of like what you said, to arise. And it has to do with thoughts that come in our mind too. Again, it's easier for us to entertain thoughts that relate to the physical body, whether those thoughts be positive or negative. Usually, a lot of times they're negative, and we entertain them and let them grow. But it can also have to do with those thoughts that are that allow us to open up in terms of spiritual awareness too.
Yes, and we're going to see by the time we get in 14, one of the things that got translated poorly, but also that arise, because it does mean arise, but that arise has a lot to do with ascension as well, as far as becoming aware of who you are. That's what that arise is alluding to. Going further, is there any other questions or thoughts about the first part?
Matthew 7:14.
Going further, it's translating as the entrance that is forced. And what we're doing is we're going to use these two because clearly they're two opposites, so you're going to use the two opposites to contrast one another. So that both of them are going to be revealing basically in a dual manner what one is compared to what the other is. Okay. The second entrance that is talked about is forced, and not only is it forced, but it had to do with a powder and clay, and also being molded. So it was actually the opposite, with it being wide, it was the opposite of that stationary path. And the journey that is broad leads to separation. And the separation that it was talking about, it also talking about a prison or also punishment. Now, that's what it talks about or alludes to when it talks about destruction. Destruction is separation, and prison and punishment.
Can you talk a little bit more about forced?
Yes. Basically, what the scripture is telling you to do really is to actually to be. That's all it's telling you to do as far as going with the flow. But when you're being, you're more so one with everything else versus if you're being forced, you're not going with the flow. It's like you're going against the current, etc. Kind of like the proverb that says, you are your most powerful when you're not trying to do anything at all. When you're just going with that flow, because once you're just going with the flow, you have the entire force of power behind you. Like say, like if you were just floating in the ocean, or if you were sailing. If you were trying to sail against the wind, then you would really, really, really struggle, and you'd get absolutely nowhere after exerting a lot of power and energy. Versus if you would just let the winds get in your sails and blow you, you will easily go and have a lot of power behind you. So the force thing is almost, you're not becoming, you're just being. Does that make any sense?
It does. I'm wondering, like, where it came from, and is it the path that was forced, or like, is that like a root of one of the words? Like, I'm just trying to place it in context. Like, I understand the bigger picture, but I'm looking for something more specific.
It was one of the actually one of the root words.
For which were roots of what?
Let me get to it.
When you say go with the flow, what do you mean exactly? I mean, because you mean your flow, not the whatever flow. Your flow?
Just
I mean, because when you're in a situation and you go with the flow, that's not always good.
what I mean by go with the this is alluding to force is saying or going with the flow is just being. So with just being, you are more so what the Chinese would call one with nature.
Mm-hmm.
And so with being one with nature, when I mean by being with the going with the flow, being one with everything basically, or being one with everyone. So viewing yourself as being others, etc. I'm trying to put it in better terms.
Is
for
it
lack of
related to
better word.
life? I guess what Janice is talking about is where did the root come out of which word? Was it out of life or was it out of
But do you see what I'm asking?
Mm-hmm. That's exactly what you're asking.
because if it comes out of life in the spiritual sense, then the flow has to do with wisdom and those kinds of spiritual
So-
attributes.
So your flow in terms of being connected,
Yes.
Yes.
Genuine.
Genuinely
Spiritual
connected, not
connection.
just
not the
doing
flow
stuff,
of whatever is
Yeah.
going on.
not doing stuff almost like for yourself, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
And the point is, when you come out of the genuine flow and force of spiritual connection, it's like that bird or that truck or that car behind the truck, and you're behind it and the truck is going, and you're finding that you're pulled along without actually having to exert a lot of
energy.
your own energy. Or like the birds that fly in the V.
The thing that works against the force, or how you go against the force, is by just trying to basically only rely on your own intellect, and in doing so, basically operating in fear or in hate, which is not love. That's what we more so mean by going with the flow or not going with the flow.
Okay.
Does that help out, Janice? Or do you need to go a little
It
bit further?
does. I was digging around in the different in the concordance for the different words in the verse,
Mhm.
and I was looking at broad, and it has a root word for land that's been cultivated.
But it also it had land that was cultivated, but I noticed most of the words actually dealt with farmland, and definitely outside the city, and a very, very large amount of a large amount of land. And then once you if you go to G5561 and then click on Thayer's lexicon under that.
I see.
That's when it has it's not that that what you're looking at, well, what you're thinking at as far as cultivated land is concerned. The destruction which consists in the loss of eternal life, eternal misery, and perdition, perishing, ruin, destruction.
Okay. I don't know how you got to that, but I was thinking about it, and it fits in with what you were saying, that you kind of make your own way, you force like something into being, and it just ends up creating separation.
And you automatically do that when you try to do something, for something yourself, instead of just going with the flow. Basically, with going with the flow, it is natural to be one. It is unnatural, even though it seems natural. It is actually unnatural to do things that that separate yourselves from other people, which also goes with the destruction. Good. Anything else? Ms. Barber, did you say something?
No. If you look at the space that lies between two places or two limits, I guess the question is, what are those spaces and limits? What? We're still talking about the word broad, right? And that's the physical sense of broad, two spaces or limits. But the spiritual sense of broad, I wonder if it has to do with entertaining any and every kind of thought. Anything that comes in your mind, you entertain it, rather than you know, the resurrection of truth, the remembering of who we really are. We just entertain any and everything, and that's probably why people are so confused. They act on any and everything that comes into their minds. When I think about the broad way, the way has to do with having also the way and manner of thinking, of deciding, so.
It also breaks down further to a gaping opening, or a chasm, or a gulf as well. And that's the last root.
And so the gulf, then, if you follow that line, has to do with what? It means a separation from something. If it's a gulf, it's similar to the limits and the space line between two limits.
What I hear is, okay, you're saying the Broadway is like a cultivated area of field, but the gate is just an opening or a chasm or it's like.
Well, there's a gate for both of them, so there's an entrance for
One's a
both
narrow
of them.
one and one's a broad.
Yeah.
Okay.
Looking at the broad one versus the narrow one, and the spiritual implications of both.
But you're saying the narrow one is like
The narrow one also dealt with being something that's fortified, something that was definitely solid and seated as if it was permanent. It was there. Whereas the broad one broke down to like pottery and clay and something that was actually molded as if it was false or handmade.
Okay.
Which will allude to someone trying to make something themselves or for something themselves.
It also kind of alludes to me to you can't always take the easy way.
And that's going to be shown also we have to get to it though. In the 14th verse, with one of the words that actually, what it actually breaks down to, it breaks down to that. Yeah, because we're also using compare and contrast, since there's two different paths and they're clearly opposite. So where attribute or trait is given on one side, it would be the opposite on the other side.
Okay.
Then the verse goes on to say, after, for wide is the gate and broad is the way that leads to destruction, and many are those who enter in by it. And that translated to, it gives over to eternal misery in hell, actually. I'll tell you how I got that.
From the word gate, it can relate to the gates of hell, or it can relate to a prison, or but it also can relate. The word gate can relate to any interest in any state of mind, in a sense too. Mm-hmm. So you can choose, in a sense, and I guess this is what it's all about: what we choose. The state of mind, what we choose to meditate on, what we choose to think on.
Yes. Oh, sorry, when I said give over to eternal misery and hell, that was referring to destruction. Sorry about that. That's what destruction broke down to, all those things. And like I said before, it had to do with separation and that prison and that punishment as well. And then give over to eternal misery in hell. That's what destruction goes down to. And of course, many go to this way of existing. A lot of people go that way, with that way being the easy route, of course.
So eternal, if we look at the word eternal life, it has to do with knowing God. I think that's what it says, something about that in John, knowing God.
What?
And so eternal hell is continuously functioning under the disillusionment of being separated from our source.
Mm-hmm. I guess how I'm going about doing, I guess I should tell you exactly what it's saying ahead of time. Okay, and I guess that we can discuss it. Okay, the two it's is the it in 13 is the it in 14. Those are two totally different words. The it in 14 is alluding to know thyself and he self and themself, which completely throws it off when it says it, because it takes it completely off of the person. The other thing that it was apparent that I know I missed before is it's saying that going through the narrow gate leads to life. It's not leading to heaven, it's leading to life. And so what this is actually talking about is it's talking about a state of being as far as basically heaven on earth. This going to a prison and going in this misery, this constant state that one is actually living in, that is someone going through basically their personal hell on earth. But the part that was key is the part that alludes to life. When this has been taken to mean basically what's going to happen with you in a afterlife.
Oh, say that again now. I just missed some. When you said afterlife.
I was saying
in one sense you were talking about life in the here and now, heaven on earth, or hell on earth, and then you said this next one has to do with.
Oh, I was saying opposed to the traditional way of viewing it as this just means you
An
need
afterlife.
to,
Okay,
you need to basically walk this narrow path and be super holy while you on earth, so you can then go to heaven later. When
Gotcha.
this is basically talking about a state of being in the condition that you're being in at the moment. And when you're talking about in John about knowing God, the 14th verse is talking about knowing thyself, and it is God, but it's talking about knowing yourself as God and realizing who you are and things like that. But that's not realized until you are walking in that path with the flow of being one, and you begin to view yourself as a part of the whole. And once you encounter your neighbor or whomever, you become one when you see yourself in that person.
So your point is in 14 that it has to do with that finding yourself, finding the true you, the Elohim you.
Yes.
And we usually, in the past, I've thought about that as relating to the gate itself, or finding this way, or this narrow, going through this narrow gate, thinking that the gate, it referred to the gate, rather than knowing that the gate is me, in a sense.
Yes, in the 13th verse, it ends with it, which is autos. It's a very poor translation. The it that's in the 14th verse is a totally different word, which is hato. So autos and hatos. Hatos refers to himself, herself, itself, and themselves. Clearly talking about an individual, which is you.
So which one is that, 13 and 14?
That is the 14th verse. That's when it's talking about going through the small gate and the way that is narrow, that leads to life, and there are few who find it. Now, in this particular verse as well.
Wow.
Hmm?
Sorry. Did you translate the it from the previous verse?
Nah,
13?
hold on.
It's just when you get to the root of it, the first it has to do with lower and denser air as distinguished from the higher and rarer air.
Mm-hmm.
You said once you go to the root.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, you see that?
It's interesting.
Yeah.
No, I can't do it
Sorry.
as fast. but I follow what you're saying. Density concretes and makes things more solid, and so it's still based on the illusion of the seeking of myself as I think I am, rather than as I truly am.
But then there's also a big distinction as well, though, with it telling you that it's not the higher and the rarer air.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, the lower and denser one.
So the gates are inside of you. Not even really inside of you, because you are the upper gate. That is, it almost seems like they're upper and lower gates now.
Mm-hmm. Like a state of
But at the same time,
consciousness.
in verse 14, it's saying to know thyself. So actually, when you're going through the lower gate, it's actually an illusion. It's a gate that you make up yourself.
Right, because it's the cultivated.
Yeah, it doesn't even exist.
like the lower. It's the same sense of the upper and the lower self, in a sense. Cultivation has to do with earthly, so it has to do with Malkut, or the world, this illusion of world that we created.
then also in the 14th verse, which is a little different. In the first verse, it used narrow as 47:28. And then in the 14th verse, it uses, the way they have it, they now have narrow as being small, but still 47:28. But then they use a different narrow, which is 23:46. And this narrow now, because they switched up the words, is actually talking about a journey that is actually distress, that leads to absolute fullness of life. So going back to when we were talking about earlier, one taking the easy one and the one that was seen natural by someone basically just looking out for themselves and things like that, versus taking the one that is a little harder to basically obtain at first. It is a distress journey, because both of them have to do with taking a journey, going to the gate that actually exists, or manufacturing this other lower gate. Going into narrow is, this one is compressed and contracted, and is a metaphor for trouble, afflict, and distress. And also, I see it has a worn path and it has a wound as well. So I'm wondering if that means you have to retrace your wounds, because when we talk about being as a child, and what makes it so difficult for people to basically be as a child is because usually a child goes about doing everything freely. They don't have any restraints as far as their love or the things that they do with people and stuff like that because of what might happen to them. But a lot of times later on in life, our habits and the things we do started being dictated by past experiences and what we're actually trying to avoid. So that is definitely a wound that you would have to deal with and get over if you're going to go down that narrow path. Janice.
What? Huh? Nothing. One of the I saw something in there about grapes being pressed for the narrow way.
Which one was that? Because I remember seeing it too, but I don't remember which narrow it was.
2346. The constricted path, or the constricted, compressed.
Okay, the second narrow that they used in the second verse versus
Yes.
the 13th.
714.
Yeah.
But is that because you have to, in this narrow way, this narrow gate, does it allude to the need to have to push your way through?
You definitely have to push your way through that. Because it's definitely a lot.
Yeah,
it's a lot easier to keep that wall up
It's an
around
effort as
yourself.
opposed to choosing the easy way.
Yeah, the easy way is just to keep that wall up around yourself and protect yourself and only look out for your individual self. Which makes it very, very difficult for people to do, and it's actually very rare that people do it. Especially to completely trust someone after really, really, really being scorned. that stuck out to me the most was it was talking about life. So this is all of this is talking about something that is done now on earth, and it's actually changed now on earth. It's not something that you're waiting for in the future after you pass away. So we actively determine whether we're going to reside basically in heaven or hell, depending on which gate we choose to enter, or which journey we choose to take. Because this is a constant thing, every single moment.
When you looked at those two, Janice, when you looked at those two narrows, were you looking at the NSAB? Because they are, were you looking at the NSAB? Because they are two different, that's okay.
I don't know what I'm looking at. Some Greek words in a concordance, but I don't know.
Because when you talked about grapes and pressing, that's, in the 14th verse, that's the kind of narrow it's alluding to.
But the meaning was totally changed, and they just put the same words and everything as if the words were just interchangeable.
Because I mean, when you look at it that way, we talk about, why I'm doing everything, I'm tithing, I'm doing all this other good stuff, I'm visiting the poor and the sick, and why do I still have trouble? But we've always said this: the essence of pressing into you and finding you is how you do respond in seeming adversity. I mean, if everything's always easy, that's that wide gate. But when you're really pressed, when your back's against the wall, when you are stretched, how do you respond? A lot of times we don't know what's in us, and I don't mean literally in us, but we don't know what we're made of until we see how we respond in situations which seemingly press the grapes, press us. Constrain us, or attempt to constrain us. So that narrowness, another way to look at it in verse 14, if it has to do with trouble and affliction and distress, it might seemingly relate to how we respond under those types of conditions too. Do we still stay in the flow, the genuineness of who we really are?
That would be the time that it's hardest to truly stay in your heart as well. I guess, well, and I guess I know, during those times, if you're not really genuine about something, it will be very difficult to actually go through doing it versus just doing it when it comes easy.
That's why it's easy to go through that other gate. Who wants to feel that compression? Who wants, if you really think about it.
And there were some other words associated with that too that were like trauma and bruising and shattering and all this other painful stuff. I'm like, darn.
So no wonder people don't want to go through that
Yeah.
gate. That state of awareness, get to that.
You almost sound like, we'll think about that another day.
That's what it feels like sometimes, though. I mean, as we talk about it in here.
But it's so easy when we say, for me to live is Christ. And that's what it's all about right there. We don't think about, for me to live is Christ. Well, what happened in terms of Christness, in terms of deliverance, in terms of being a deliverer? The bruising happens, the shattering of my ego. All of that stuff is a part of living as this Christness, this state of consciousness. But we don't think about that. It just sounds so good. For me to live as Christ and to die as gain. But it's the bruising, that's part of the dying.
Mm-hmm.
It's the battering, that's part of the dying. But it just flows off our lips so easily without looking at underneath. What does that really, really mean? And all of this is seemingly, it's also interconnected, that as we live this way, that's going through the narrow gate, in a sense.
And this is I don't know if this is off subject or not, but I also found out last night in Barbara something that is pivotal or prominent. That verse that was translated as my God, why have you forsaken me? It's not saying that in Aramaic.
Mm-hmm.
It's saying my God, basically. So this is my mission.
Yeah, okay. Really is saying that.
Yes, it's saying so
different.
So this is what I have been commissioned to do.
Mm-hmm.
This is my job.
That could mean a bunch of different things depending on the tone in which it was spoken.
No, it was the context that it was actually used in. It was used in like taking, like accepting the mission, like.
Okay.
Instead of the context that we usually see it in is what forsaken means to leave me out there on my own,
why did you
alone,
do
separate
this
from
to me?
you.
Yes.
It does put a different perspective on it.
Trying to go to the verse. Did I know you see anything else in it?
What are you looking for?
Oh, no, I was talking about 13 and 14. Matthew. Okay, I have it. Yes, Matthew 27 and 46, and in the Aramaic, it ends in Eli Eli Lama Sabachthani, and that's what translate to that. So this is my destiny. Not my God, why hast thou forsaken me? So it's, it can be translated as my God, for this is why I was spared. Or this was my destiny.
So that's all of our destiny.
Time back with 13 and 14.
Uh-huh. Hmm. Interesting. That's real good meat for today. Hmm.
Hello.
Hello.
Yes.
Hello.
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 Hi.
I don't hear anything.
We're pondering.
Hi.
That was
Hi.
that was Matthew what? 27 and 40. 46. Oh yeah, gotcha. Gotcha.
You late?
No, I'm not.
Well, what we were talking about this past second was Matthew 27 and 46. That does not
Uh-huh.
say, my God, why have you forsaken me?
What does it say?
Huh?
What does it say?
The Aramaic is Eli Eli Lama Sabachthani, and that is actually instead saying, my God, for this I was spared, or my God, this was my destiny. So it's not.
I like that.
Huh?
I can see that.
So how'd you get to the Aramaic from there? Because everything I have still points me to,
My God, why have you forsaken me?
and I'm looking at the forsaken part.
You're looking at it in Greek.
What does it say in the Greek?
It says same thing we always said: leave in strait, leave helpless, abandon. Oh, leave them. Here's another one: leave behind, among, or to leave surviving. So what did you look at in the Aramaic to get to the that understanding?
I was looking at it from the Nazarenes.
Oh, from that translation.
What does the Peshitta say? The Syriac Peshitta.
The Peshitta,
Yeah.
I'm not sure what the Peshitta says, but I did find some discrepancies in that when I was looking at the Our Father's Prayer.
Well, I did too. That's why I wondered what it said, because with the Peshitta, I found that you have to back it up with other sources.
Okay, I see what you're saying.
Yeah. Some of it with the Peshitta, when you look at it from other sources, it's right on. You know, it's spot on. But a lot of it you have to back it up from other sources. That's why I never recommended the Peshitta for everybody.
I
Yeah.
see. I'm going to look at
So
it
did
now.
you?
Huh?
Did you look at the rest of that on the cross? Beyond my God, why hast thou forsaken me? Into thy hands I commend my spirit. I commend my breath unto your. I give my breath to your authority. That kind of thing. Did you look at that?
No, I didn't get that far. That's not the scripture that I actually started off with. We kind of
That doesn't surprise.
we kind of went off on a tangent.
No, not a tangent. We just flowed in another river, that's all.
Yeah.
I may have it in a second.
Okay. What was the foundational scripture?
We started off in
Matthew 7.
Matthew 7, 13, and 14. And
Okay.
the Bible has that verse all screwed up, basically. You know, the English version is just all
Yes,
screwed up.
There you
You could have been nicer and say that the English version did not do it justice.
go. There you go.
Yeah.
Yes.
I straightened it up.
Oh.
They mixing up, like, they using it for two different words. They using narrow for two different words.
Oh, you talking about straight is the way, narrow is the gate.
Yeah.
Yeah, all that. The it that is
Oh,
talking
yeah.
about.
I know. I know it's talking about the obstacles that's around the pathway. When it talks about narrow
Uh-huh.
and straight does not mean straight in terms of, as opposed to crooked. Yeah. I know.
And then that second it is talking about knowing your coming into an awareness of yourself or thyself.
Yeah. Yeah. You don't speak old English, so it's yourself.
Say it again.
You don't speak old English, so it's yourself, not instead of thyself.
I'm just telling you what it breaks down to in the Greek.
I know.
I know you're giving me a hard time.
That's because I know you can handle it. So have you found it yet?
Not quite yet.
Okay.
I guess we making Miss Barbara learn how to use her computer.
Yes, you are. Because I'm finding some things for this word "fine" too in 7:14. It's
What you found the fight, Sheldon, online?
Say it again.
You found the site online that gave you that understanding?
Yes, is the translation directly from the Aramaic is on the Nazarene site, but it's from a particular person who translated it recently directly from the Aramaic.
Okay, send me the link. When you get a chance, send me the link.
I will do that.
me too, please.
Yeah.
And that's when I started, well, at first I started finding all these discrepancies myself, and then digging further, that's when I ran across that stuff.
Okay.
Which, I guess you would say that's a pretty big scripture
Yeah.
in Christianity
Major.
to be taken completely the wrong way.
Of course it is, but if you notice, we began to look more in depth at the birth and what it meant when it got close to Christmas, and now we're getting close to Easter, and look what we're doing. So it's not being all faith, it's being guided. So it gives opportunity to take the energy out of the false teaching that's out there.
I see.
Yeah.
Yes,
That's why.
Go ahead.
That's why it's so important to follow what you feel as opposed to trying to stick to an outline.
Got you. Yeah, I definitely went off the outline today.
Yeah. There has been, I've experienced some tremendous energy transfers too, by the way.
You talking about at your current location? am seeing a lot off Amazon with this particular person, the scholar who translated it. But I can send you that the site where I have it off of though.
Okay, if you send me that link, then I can go to Barnes Noble or to iBooks and download it. I mean, to Amazon, if it's ebooks.
Got you.
There's $109 left for the funeral.
Yeah.
Huh?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Okay.
Where's it gonna be?
Did I hear Denise?
You did.
Okay.
Good morning.
Good morning. While you're looking, let me give you I need some hard numbers for June, okay? So start thinking about who's going with you when you go in terms of spouse, friends, etc.
In terms of what? In terms of what?
Spouses, friends, etc. When we go to in June.
Okay.
I talked to the people at the hotel,
To Philadelphia.
and I need to get some hard numbers.
Okay. The accounts for the Gospel of Luke and Gospel of John are also very different from those with Matthew and Mark. Luke 23:46 is, and when Jesus had cried with a loud voice, he said, Father, into thy hands I commend my spirit. And having said this, he gave up the ghost.
Right.
And in John 19:30, when Jesus therefore had received the vinegar, he said, it is finished. And he bowed his head and gave up the ghost.
Okay. So the question is, are those close, similar, or what?
Are they what now?
Why were the accounts so different? Because when you look at the Father, into thine hands I commend my spirit, that is different than, and when he had taken the vinegar, he bowed his head and gave up the ghost.
Uh-huh.
Because I think you go find, if you look up ghost, if I'm not mistaken, you go find the same words, the spirit of breath. And in doing so, if I'm correct in that, then what he actually did was exit the body.
And gave up his body with the body being the ghost?
No, he exited the body, meaning that he gave the ghost. If the ghost is something that's not real, right? Would the ghost be the spirit of this world that he gave up? I would like to look at that closely.
First, ghost is to breathe out one's
Okay.
life and breathe one's last, expire.
That's it. Okay.
And
So,
go
ahead.
the two root words for that is to breathe, to blow of the wind, and out of, from, by, away from.
I don't believe gave up is in there. I believe that it says that he said, Father, into thine hands I commend my spirit, and he breathed his last, he breathed his last. It means that he breathed the last time in that body. I don't believe gave up is there. It's just like when you look at in the beginning,
Uh-huh.
you find that in thee is not there. It's beginning. That's all it is. and in the modern Hebrew it is Resh, and the Orthodox Hebrew is Reshit. It says Reshit, and the Orthodox Hebrew is Reshit. So I'm thinking that, I'm believing that gave up and not even there. That is the reason the scriptures were, the books that were chosen, that's the reason they were chosen. Because they were easier to manipulate than like Thomas and some of the other books. It's easier, they were easier to manipulate. They didn't have time to do it. What were you about to say?
I went to Psalms 22:1, which was originally what Jesus was supposed to be quoting from the Old Testament.
Right.
And when you look at forsaken from the Hebrew, it also means to restore and repair.
Okay, so Papa put it together.
Not yet.
It means to restore and to repair. Now read it from 22, Psalm 22.
22:1.
Yeah.
Hold on, let me go because I'm on the New American Standard Bible says, for the choir director upon Agilah Hashahar, a psalm of David, my God, why have you forsaken me? Far from my deliverance are the words of my groaning.
That's 22 what?
22:1, Psalm 22:1.
Now, when you look up the word forsaken in the Hebrew, what does it mean?
It means to leave, loose, and forsake, but then the other one, it means to restore and repair. And it's a primitive root, so it doesn't have another word for it.
Okay.
But it said, it also means, though, to loosen bands and to let go a beast from his bonds. So this is actually as well, because it has to do also with letting a slave free. So it also has to do with freeing as well. It's not just leaving behind, it's freeing.
Okay, so if it talks about being free, then that should be connected to the understanding of body. Because even if you look at body in the Greek, the root word for it is sozo, which means delivered, and body is soma. So it's talking about being delivered from the bondage of the body, you think?
Yeah.
Yes. It says there's a play of the words in the double use of the verb, which stands first in the common signification of forsaking. Then in the primary one of loosing, it is applied to a servant set free.
Okay, so that does make sense then. He was saying that he had been freed from the bondage of the body, which goes back to thou shalt surely die, from, eating from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And in actuality, when the skin was put upon man, at that point, he was being saved from himself and didn't realize it, but it became his grave.
Yeah.
Because thou shalt surely die. So the skin, actually, the body actually became a grave, or is a grave rather. So that's why it's death, an illusion, as opposed to life, the thing that we see when we're asleep.
Because then the same word is used in Job 10:1, and there in Job, it is I will let loose my complaint. I will let loose as it were the reins. I will not restrain it. So yeah, it keeps on over and over again talking about freeing.
Yes. So the whole idea of crucifixion is about freedom. So when he says pick up your cross daily and follow me, where are you following him to? You're following him to the place of death, Golgotha Hill, right?
Uh-huh.
And the place of, and Golgotha Hill, the place of death, is not the place of death of the man, but the place of death of bondage. When the body died, bondage died. Suppose for a moment with that, you could actually see when someone is put in the grave, suppose their body deteriorated instantly. Have you seen those movies out of the Middle East when the fellow rises up out of the sand and then all of a sudden he goes back to the sand instantly?
Yes.
You know, just, okay, imagine death being that. The body dies and it just diminishes into sand or just particles instantly. Now, what happens, it does that, but it does it slower than what we see in those movies. You see what I'm talking about?
Uh-huh.
So the death of it is actually the decomposition of it. And decomposition means that it is not, it is different than what it was when it was composed into a solid object. Or supposedly a solid object anyway. So the freedom of it is when the body decomposes. That's what he was talking about. But decomposition doesn't mean what we think it means. Because when he was resurrected, he had a body, right?
Yeah.
He did.
So in actuality, those things that don't permit us to walk between the world or walk between walls, or through walls rather, is the thing that keeps us in bondage. So when you're resurrected, if we can see it as the body being composed of only neutrinos, then the electrons and protons have no effect on it whatsoever. That's why he can walk through walls. And that's why it appears solid, but at the same time, it's not solid, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Well,
Yeah.
and time had no effect on them either.
I didn't hear that.
With no, without the solid matter, I mean, there's nothing to stop you from traveling through time either.
Right, exactly. And that is the reason on the road to Emmaus he was seen, but then all of a sudden he was gone, you know?
It definitely adds up and makes you look at the word slave in the body or dead in a different manner.
It really does. It really does. And I think that we're truly onto something in that what we're doing, for lack of a better term, appears to be seasonal with the religious rituals. It's taking the life out of these rituals so that man will become hungry for what's real as opposed to what has been presented to him as being real, which is actually fear. Fear. With false evidence appearing real.
Uh-huh.
And I think we're actually moving away from that false evidence that appears to be real by virtue of seeing what's really there. So anyway,
I'm
we
waiting.
gonna have to when I talk. Huh?
I have like a minute left. I think I might have found a site with that information on it from the scholar, but it's downloaded in PDF.
Okay.
It's like a 40-something seconds left.
Okay. So since you're the producer, you got to do a 40-second filler.
That's Jami's job today.
Oh, okay.
I'm just running the camera. I don't know what you're talking about.
As I look up why that same
Huh?
verse, I'm looking at the Psalm 22, and I'm going back. You know, why the question? Why have you set me free? And when you look at the verse, the word why, it goes back to what Sheldon said before in terms of purpose. Why, another way to say that is for what purpose? For what purpose have you freed me? And it's almost like a rhetorical question because, of course, the Savior would know why he was freed. But the question would be, my God, why have you forsaken me? Not even taking it as far back as Sheldon has found for the Aramaic, this is my destiny. But on the path to getting to that interpretation, the why have you forsaken me could be for what purpose have you set me free? Have you set me free or let me loose or freed me or
delivered me, or
yeah.
So is it that we have to determine the purpose for being made free? Do we determine that purpose, or do we ask ourselves that and wait for an answer, or to remind ourselves that the purpose for being free is to free others?
And then it brings up the question to me, at that time, did Jesus even want to be free?
Well, I don't think he did. And the reason I don't think he did is because when you look at the Garden of Gethsemane, where he said, if it be thy will, let this cup pass from me, I think that's saying something different based on what you just said.
Uh-huh.
I don't think it was that he didn't want to die because he was afraid of it, or as we put it, the humanity was speaking forth. I think that it may very well have been that he didn't want to be crucified at that moment. It's like, hey, I'm just getting started, you know?
Yeah, and that's what I was seeing it as. Like, he was looking at it as, I don't want to be finished. I still have more that I want and need to do.
So it's similar to what Paul did. Paul said when he said, I'd rather be with Christ, but it's profitable for me to stay here right now.
Right.
That
same
sense.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that was more or less what he was saying. Hello?
Yeah.
Where?
Oh, okay, I thought I lost you. And in saying that, what he was saying was, you know what, but if it's your desire for me to transition, okay, I'll do it. But I really don't want to do this right now. Which means that that does not indicate that he had the power to resist the transition. If he had chosen to, he didn't have to transition. It had to be agreement between him and the Father, that they were on the same page. The oneness had to exist for the transition to take place. That was not rhetorical.
We're thinking.
Okay, 40 seconds up, Sheldon.
What verse am I supposed to be looking up in the bruschetta?
I think it was 27. No, Matthew 27 and whatever it was you were looking at.
27:46.
Okay. Well, looking at it from, because I didn't find the bruschetta, just brought up something else, but I'm going to keep looking. The Lamsa translation is, and about the 9th hour, Jesus cried out with a loud voice and said, Eli, Eli, emna sa...
That's the theme.
Yeah, that word. which means,
Yeah.
my God, for this I was kept.
Which is the same.
For this I was what?
Kept. K-E-P-T.
Kept. Okay. Okay.
Wow.
So what does it mean for this I was kept? Does it mean he was kept from being killed before time?
It's the same thing. It's sort of like, this is my purpose. This is what I was supposed to do.
Yeah.
I just dug into the verse having to do with letting the cup pass,
Yeah.
and the cup can be likened to an experience. An experience, like whether it's, a good one or a bad one, basically. And I looked into the root of that, and it had to do with receiving into your soul that which refreshes or strengthens. And if you look at pass, and then, like, for me, it has to do with, like, that nourishment.
I'm sorry. I lost you when you said the cup could be. I lost you.
I'm sorry, there's someone trying to beep in on the other line. The root of cup has to do with an experience that refreshes or strengthens. And if you look up the other words nearby, the phrase itself, like cup pass for me, has to do with this nourishing, strengthening experience being passed on to other people. So it had not so much that he didn't want to experience it, but just that it would be shared.
Right. Okay.
Which changes it
Oh,
from
so-
like it's not like he was giving up a responsibility, but that he wanted the fruit of what he was doing to be passed on to other people.
So that will make sense with him when you couple it with him saying, "Pick up your cross daily and follow me." It's a shared experience.
Yeah.
So that will cause us then to look at the whole crucifixion differently, because we're not being nailed physically with a cross. That's not what he meant.
What was that scripture? If this cup be passed.
That's
Asking a question.
Matthew 26 and 39.
Oh, okay.
So then it appears then that what he was saying in the garden was it was his desire that the Father would allow what he was experiencing to be experienced by others.
Yes.
Is that the gist of it, Janice?
Yes, because pass can also mean to arrive. So it's like saying, let this nourishment arrive from me.
Okay, so that would go hand in hand with I go to prepare a place for you, with the place talking about an internal space
Yeah.
that you allow. So for the nourishment to be there, the space that you allow nourishment from the Father. So all that goes hand in hand. Then it's beginning to make more sense. So what is Jenny, look at the word Gethsemane.
Gethsemane?
Yeah.
I don't know how to spell that.
Just go back to that verse. Go back to the same chapter you were in,
G-E-T-H-S-E.
and it should be in the verse prior to that.
Okay.
And I was just thinking to myself, darn, Janice good, she know how to spell that.
Gethsame, right?
Gethsem, S-E-M-A-N-E.
S-E-M-A. S-E-M-E? I don't know. Janice, I like you, girl. I can't spell it.
G-E-T-H-S-E-M-A-N-E.
I bet Bob can spell it.
I'm looking right at it.
What's it mean?
Wait a minute. Gethsemane
What does
is
it
an
mean?
oil press. There we were back to the pressing of the oil again. An oil press.
Mm.
And it's also the name of a place at the Mount of Olives beyond. But we were talking earlier about the pressing of the wine.
Right.
Going through the narrow gate is experiencing continually the pressing of the wine. The things that we go through, the experiences that we go through, the seeming adversities that we go through, how we respond in the midst of those is the same thing as going through the narrow gate. As long as we make
Okay.
the right choice to do it, rather than go through the broad gate of any and everything coming into our mind, acting on and responding to all those thoughts. So it's all connected.
It is, in that you only get the oil from the olive when you press it, and the more you press it, the more oil you get from it. So the pressure of the change is what allowed him to get to where he was in terms of facing transition in order for others to be able to experience what he experienced without having to be nailed to a physical cross. Which means that if you don't go through hardship, you're not pressed. So going through hardship is going through the wine press or the olive press.
The other thing too is it's from an Aramaic root, because it goes back to the sense of treading grapes, a wine press.
Yes.
And it's I mean, if you think about grapes, they ferment and they're no good. But if you transforming into wine, that wine, you can have a bottle of wine for hundreds of years.
Yeah.
But if you leave the grape just like it is, I mean, it's here and it's gone. In a
Right.
sense. So if you want to transform something into a different condition or a different state where it has more lasting continuity, in a sense, that's what the wine pressing or the olive pressing or the oil pressing does.
So it becomes more valuable.
And more worthwhile and more.
Yes. Because the wine is actually more valuable than the grape.
Yeah, and it lasts longer. That's the part of the value
Right.
of it.
Yeah.
So it's like it's a transforming from one state to another, in a sense. You gotta.
But that's where the metamorphosis that Paul talked about. Being transformed by the renewing of your mind.
Yeah.
Because wine doesn't look like a grape. It's a totally different thing.
Mm-hmm.
And the oil doesn't look like an olive.
Mm-hmm.
And the prosciutto, 27
Yeah.
and 46. Until the hour ninth, Yeshua with a voice loud and said, God, God, why have you spared me?
Why have you spared me?
Yep.
Now I would be very interested in knowing if spared is one of those ways, one of those fluid, is a part of the fluidity of the meaning of the Aramaic word. Could it be translated as that, you know?
Uh-huh.
What verse is that?
46.
27, 46.
That's interesting. That's very interesting. Bob, have you looked at that prosciutto that you have?
You want the truth, or you want me to just perpetrate?
That's okay. I got the answer already.
You did. I have looked at it, but I didn't understand. I mean, not with understanding. No.
Okay.
So all of this came about, Sheldon, because you started teaching 7:13 through 14.
And then decided to take y'all
The scenic
for
route.
saving.
Yeah.
I think this is worthy of continuing the search on this, especially in that, what is it, 27th chapter, 26th chapter, where the, my God, what that forsaken me thing is.
Yeah.
I think it would be worth it to pursue that section in conjunction with the God experience, you know?
Yes, sir.
Because each one of those things that was said on the cross is supposed to be a quote of the Old Testament, each one of them. And now that you've said that, you pointed out that there was a mistranslation in my God, why is that forsaken me? The mistranslation there begs the question if not the rest of it is a mistranslation as well.
Yep. Which is why I started questioning everything I was taught a long time ago.
Yeah. That's because you're smart. That's fine. The rest of us are slow. It took a while.
Now everything was questioned. I wasn't saying it was wrong, but I wasn't saying it was right either.
Yeah, and it was not you who in terms of the human intellect that was questioning everything. It was an expression of a deep hunger to know.
Yeah, and it was you bear some of the blame as well.
Wow.
I beg your pardon.
I was in an illusion, and you ruined the illusion. You.
Oh.
He was in a delusion.
Well, I did not want you to walk around asleep and run into something that you could not handle. So it's better to awaken you so that no matter what you face, be it a circumstance of adversity or a circumstance that's beneficial, that you would know how to handle either one of them and remain balanced.
Oh, believe me, I was happy you showed me because it was some stuff that I was a little disappointed. You mean it wasn't saying this all these years, all this time?
Yeah. But everything happens in due time, everything. So Sheldon, you're the one who facilitates in the day, right?
That is correct.
Okay, so I think that we'll pick up right there next week, and you'll be facilitator, right?
On 27 and 46?
Sure. I think it's worthy of exploring even deeper than what we have. There's something there, much more than what we've seen, I think. Wouldn't you agree?
I would definitely agree.
So, Barbara Jean, you know what we're going to do next week, right?
One of these days, I'm going to find out everything that I was not doing, I was supposed to be doing.
You're doing that now.
What'd you say, Pastor?
I say, you're going to assist in facilitating this, right?
Assist what?
In facilitating this.
If I can find an internet.
Well, you know how.
Mine is not working.
How? Oh, okay.
At home, it's a lot easier to do my stuff at home.
Already. But you know how matter of fact we can be. You just
Yes, sir. Yes.
well, fine tune stuff, you know.
I had a little feminine energy. Yes.
Yeah, okay. Be modest if you please.
All right.
Yeah. It's all the difference between saying what are they talking about and somebody saying this is what they're saying.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I think this is healthy. I do. I really do. So now the news of Easter eggs has come.
These might be the eggs we find. Okay.
Okay, I'm done. I enjoy talking to you.
It's nice hearing from you.
Thanks for sharing.
Everybody in here except Miss Barbara has been telling the truth today. As you can see.
Except me.
What are you talking about?
She said nice to hear and talk to you.
Yeah.
I'm playing.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I'm going to continue on through Baltimore and guess where I'm going.
Baltimore. Okay.
Yeah, I'm about an hour out of D.C.
Hey.
Okay.
Okay.
Shalom, Pastor.
You
I
gonna,
d-
you gonna,
Okay.
all right.
What do you say, Sheldon?
I was just about to ask you gonna catch up with Neo. Nick.
With Nick, I get ready to say Neil. Yeah, I'll probably give Nick a call later on this evening, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Shalom, Pastor.
Okay. All right, we'll talk.
All right. Zajin.
All right.
Shalom.
Yeah. Okay, bye.
Bye.
It is Matthew 27:46.
Yes,
The
ma'am.
word "me," have you forsaken me? If you look that up, it is translated ego.
Oh, for me?
Mm-hmm. Yep. I'm looking, it's 1473. Why have you forsaken me? 1473. Oh, shut your bed. And it's translated, the transliteration is ego.
Okay. I see what you're saying.
So you could take that a whole nother way if you look at it that way.
Yes.
But it's the same thing as God with us. And when you look at
Uh-huh.
it, and you know, it's I wonder if it has to do with the us of Malkut. Malkut. The
Okay.
like, and you look at it, even when John says, you that Jesus came to him saying you need to be baptized by you, and do you come to me? Me?
Yeah, I keep saying.
This earthly me, that's another thing to look at too.
I see in Matthew 4,
Mm-hmm.
bow
Follow
down and
me.
worship me. Yeah, follow me, and I will make you fishers of men. Counsel evil against you because of me.
Anyway, whole nother That's a whole nother path. That probably comes to the same point.
Yes.
Hmm.
Well, we are finished for today.
Okay.